You're listening to Off to Market with Scott Farley and Hamish Chadwick.
Hi, I'm Scott.
And I'm Hamish.
And today we're going to be talking about messaging, which is a field that Hamish is very good with. So we're going to try and share that information that he has locked away in his brain with all of you people out there who are interested in messaging.
Locked away, gee, eh? That's
so
scary stuff.
in the vault.
I'll see what I can dig out.
Messaging. Can you just explain messaging to us and what it means as far as product placement and recognition?
Well, okay. I call it messaging. I mean, I suppose for want of a better term, I do a lot of brand consulting. But to me, message, when it is related to a company or a product, is anything that company does, or anything or anywhere where that product is seen, how that's received by the market. So messaging, it just depends on what you do. So if you're selling
so it's the message that you're putting out as a brand to the general public.
Oh, well, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I should explain what I mean by when we talk about messaging. It's the total dynamics. If you're looking at, what is the message of a particular product, we're looking at the entire dynamics of that product. So how it looks, how it smells, what its price point is, what colour is it, how people talk about it. That's all part of the message. So in order to control those things,
how people perceive it.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. That is the message. But if you break it down from what makes a message, it really depends on what that product is, because a message is built up of so many tiny little things. I mean, when you talk about a brand, people often think, oh, well, I'm rebranding. Often that just means I'm getting new colours, new logos, I'm modernising. For want of another better term too, whatever that means. That means they're keeping up with a trend. That means that's a strategy in itself too, to modernise.
I'm no longer old-fashioned.
That's right.
I'm a modern product. I'm current.
Yes, and there's obviously particular looks, and there's particular things you can say. There's even particular language styles you can use in order to, in your market, look modern. Sometimes it's better to look not so much modern, but you get more specific. You want to look, say, more technical, or you want to look more trendy. Now that doesn't necessarily mean modern either. So it's all about how you define how you need to look in order to compete in a particular way that's profitable in your market. So there's two types of messaging problem, or what I should say is two primary, there's all sorts of different issues you can run into, but the two primary types of messaging problem that companies have is there's no clear idea of what value you offer. So it's a confusing brand. So people that use clever taglines, there's no clear indication of what the product does or what the business offers. Obviously they've maybe perhaps got a client base that exists and they know them very well, but when they then start to go out into the market to get new clients, there's no clear differentiation, there's no idea of what that company does, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And then the other type is people know what you do, however the perceived value is low. So if you've got a lot of competitors in a market, or your branding is creating too much competition, what I mean by that is if you have a commoditized product, or if you're operating in a commoditized industry, so that's where maybe the prices are coming down, there's low barriers to entry. Simply marketing with what you had, say, 10 years previous is putting you on a compete with price only footing, which can make it very difficult to sell, and eventually you will just have to get into essentially a price war. But I think the most interesting one though is where there's no clear idea of what value you offer. And I came into contact with a company a couple of weekends ago at a trade show, and I was helping a client out at this particular trade show, and we were sitting there I think for about an hour and a half, where we were facing this company that had a massive stand. It was very colourful, and they'd spent a lot of money on marketing, and we both sort of looked at each other at the end of when they were packing up, and we both sort of went, well, what do they do? Like, we just had no idea. And we actually sort of waved them over because they were leaving, and we simply asked them, what is it? We think you do this. And they said, oh, no, a lot of people think that, but we actually do X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, can't you just put that on your marketing? Because all the language that you've used, you even had an explainer video that was running constantly with all these complex ideas and services that you can offer. However, they didn't encapsulate that. So I was looking at all their marketing at face value, and it was very, very difficult to understand what it is they do.
You think they've overcomplicated it?
Well, overcomplicated it through offering too many services. I suppose they were breaking their services down into...
Do you think that's because they've internally they know their product backwards, so they're not looking at it from the new player's perspective. They're looking at it from their existing knowledge base.
Well, to
and
not
putting
be
all that information down, being over technical and not keeping it simple enough.
I diagnose the problem, and this is no slight on companies that do this. I mean, if they see that they've got a problem and want to fix it, that's where you need an outsider's perspective to correct it. But really, all I saw was a lot of marketing that was conforming to a lot of backslapping at a board level, really. The company was looking at themselves going, aren't we great? We need to push all these different services because we think this is what makes us great. However, from an outsider's perspective, everyone just walks past and thinks, okay, I sort of get it, or maybe I've been using them for 10 years, I know exactly what they do for me. However, if you're going out and trying to find new customers, the message that they were putting across was so complex. Even though they tried to simplify it, even with the simplification, the language they were using was far too complex. Because she walked over, we had a quick chat, and I said, well, sum it up. What do you guys actually do? What value can you provide? And what she said in a matter of, I think, about 8 to 10 words, we both had our aha moment, and then we started asking more questions about other services they may provide, which they ended up being able to provide.
And isn't that interesting? That's a trade show, so you realise the message is important on so many levels. A trade show is not a lot different to retail, where you've only got 30 seconds to get someone's attention and drag them towards your stand.
Well, perhaps. I think
really, if we're walking around a trade show, you'll be there all day. You're usually there for employment reasons, whatever. It's tiring. You're worn out. There's 1,000 things to look at, but only certain things you're actually going to need to go and check out. If you miss that opportunity, you're missing customers.
And I think that's the great trick with messaging and branding is
websites the same.
I think people get worried that by having a message that is, well, especially at that level, that is simple and easy to understand, will make the company appear to be simple and maybe cheap, or they're not building it up in a way that they want to seem sophisticated within a market. But I think, honestly, in today's world where we've got so many messages around us, and that's a given, but I think we have to remind ourselves that there is so much visual material flying around in front of us all the time, that if we want to come across your company and be able to understand its value, you need to work hard at being very, very simple. And that's a difficult task.
I think Apple did that very well. Apple was one of the first companies I know of who actually went to very simple messaging, and it almost differentiated them in the market because everyone else is so complicated. Their very simple messaging stood out with neon lights around it because they're like, well, they've only said 4 words, but it's so compelling.
Well, and that's interesting you talk about Apple, because I mean, I've been using their products for about 20 years now, and where it's critical for their message is within their software and their usability. They've always, especially in the early days, I mean, a lot of the other competitors have caught up now in terms of the simplicity, but the software used to be very, in comparison, very easy to use. They were very much in favour of using a mouse rather than just keyboard inputs with things like DOS. Now I'm showing my age, but I mean, we all grew up with those two systems, and one used a keyboard and one used a mouse, and it was always the Apple went down the road of just being ultra simple, and they've continued that on, and that's their message. If Apple was to somehow had a brain explosion and come out with some software which was very complex, very clunky, very hard to navigate, well then that goes against everything that they stand for in the market, and that is their brand, is simplicity.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it goes across a lot of levels, the message that a company can portray, and it's not only through written matter but visual, touch, everything. Every aspect of a company's persona needs to have a single direction.
And I think that's, again, when we're talking about every aspect of a company, it's also behaviours. That's another critical area. So if you've got a team, even if you're just on your own, I mean, you have to look at how you behave in front of clients. What sort of language use do you use? Do you need to be seen as complex? Do you need to be seen as scientific? Do you need to be seen as simple? Do you need to be on trend? And I suppose the bigger the company, the more people that you have to not so much control, I don't like using that word, but certainly guide. You need to be able to say to someone that's going to work for you and your team, especially if you've got a new company, for a new product that you're have designed, is to what are the expectations? How are we building this up when we talk to customers? And especially, one of your most powerful messaging platforms are sales representatives. So anyone that works for you that represents you, it's amazing how many companies don't take into consideration their brand when it comes to their sales reps. So, your brand might say one thing, and then all of a sudden, you've got a sales rep that just goes very headstrong and acts like a bull in a china shop, and has a very hard sales approach in front of customers. Well, is that helping, or is that diminishing your brand position ultimately? So there's quite a bit to take into consideration there.
Excellent. Very informative. Thank you, Hamish. That's been great. Nice little insight into messaging and how important it is in directing your company and getting the perception of buyers correct and attracting them to your company.
You've been listening to Off to Market with Scott Farley and Hamish Chadwick.